Polly Patchwork by Rachel Field. This happened a long time ago when your great-grandmothers were little girls, and you can believe it or not, as you think best. After all, it's only a story with no feelings to get hurt if people don't happen to like it. Well, there was once a little girl named Polly who lived with her grandmother in a cottage on the edge of Cranberry Common, which lies in a hollow between Tumbledown Mountain and the sea. It was the smallest house for miles about, and rather odd as to chimney and shutters, but it had a twisted thorn tree growing beside it, and a lilac bush by the door, and that's as far more important, especially in spring. It had a garden, too, so full of orange marigolds that there were never room for anything else to come up. For years the neighbors had urged Polly's grandmother to grow more useful things like potatoes and carrots and cabbages, to put by for the winter. She agreed with them perfectly and planted all the seeds they bought her, and still nothing but the orange marigolds ever came up. It seemed as if the soil just wouldn't have anything to do with the useful seeds. So after a while the neighbors gave up advising, and Polly and her grandmother were delighted, for they much preferred marigolds. But now marigolds' time was past, and even the thorn tree was losing its red berries. Every morning when Polly went out to pick up fir cones for their fire, and ground would be white with hoar frost and wild geese honking overhead as they flew south in great triangular-shaped companies. "That means winter is nearly here," said the grandmother, as she measured out their johnny-cake meal in a big yellow bowl. "And you will need a new dress to keep you warm." She sighed, for she was thinking how soon snow would be all around the doorsteps, and the wind blowing up like a cracking whip from the sea. And when they had bought enough molasses and johnny-cake meal to last all winter, there would be very few coppers left in the old china pitcher on the mantelpiece, not nearly enough to buy a new dress for Polly, though to be sure it didn't take so many yards to go round her. Now Polly knew why her grandmother had sighed, and when the sun was warm enough and all the crickets making a great to-do in the brown grass at her feet, she gathered the roundest and reddest thornberries she could find under the old tree. Then she begged a needle and thread of her grandmother and strung them into a necklace for herself. They looked so shiny and scarlet that she felt sure they would keep her warm all winter. But her grandmother knew better, and she shook her head when Polly set off for school in her cotton dress. "Red beads are all very fine," she said, "but they won't keep the wind out like wool. We must see what we can find in the attic." So she climbed up under the eaves to rummage in an old pine chest, filled with the funniest old odds and ends you ever saw. There was an old guitar with faded yellow ribbons and only one string, a high silk hat with a crumpled in the middle, and a parasol without any handle, one tarnished silver buckle, a pair of lace and mitts, and at the very bottom a patchwork quilt made out of happy squared colors, sewed together in a jumble of reds and greens and blues and yellows, with figures and flowers and plaids and stripes of every sort besides. "The very thing," said the grandmother, holding it up to the light. "Not a hole in it, and we have 2 comforters to sleep under, so this will do nicely for Polly." She carried it down by the fire and set to work with scissors and thimble and needle and thread. First she spread the quilt out smooth and flat, and then she laid one of Polly's old dresses down on it, and cut all round the edges, being careful to allow for growing, and both sideways and endways. Then she sat down to work with all her might. She sewed so hard that her cheeks grew almost as red as the thornberries outside the window, and her needle went click, click, click against her thimble like a little clock ticking very fast. All the time she sewed, she rocked back and forth and sang a snatch of a tune over and over. Her own grandmother had taught it to her long ago, and it went something like this: fold and snip and fold, some are young and some are old. In and out and in, some will dance and some will spin. Sew and stitch and sew. Some will come and some will go. Knot and twist and knot. Some will wed and some will not. Polly could hear her grandmother singing this when she turned in at the gate after school, and she knew something important must be going on, for her grandmother sang it only on special occasions. But when Polly opened the door and saw the reason, she felt like singing a very different sort of tune. Still, her grandmother seemed so pleased with the patchwork dress that Polly hadn't the heart to tell her she would rather be cold than wear it. "It's a mercy I found it," her grandmother told her. "They call it the crazy quilt pattern, and all the bits are real silk, and as good as when my great-aunt Mayetball pieced it together. I can remember seeing her make it when I was a little girl no bigger than you. Come here and let me try it on you." Now Polly did not like the sound of the name any more than she liked the looks of it, but she stood as still as she could to have it fitted. This was not so easy to do. Her grandmother might as well have tried to fit the sails of a little ship about her. So stiff and billowing did it stand out in every direction. "Well, I give up," said she at last, when she saw that she could not make it fall in soft folds. "But it will flatten down after you've worn it a while. The colors are so nice and bright, it won't matter if it does balloon out a little." Polly thought it would matter very much to her, and she wished the colors would all fade, for even the dingiest brown would be better than a dress made of all patchwork quilts. But presently she went out to bring in another basket full of cones, and there was a little thread, a new moon just showing above a fir top, and the sky still pink in sunset, and all the crickets singing, and the tree toads ringing their little bells to keep the frost away. So she could not help feeling better about it, and she looked over her left shoulder and wished a wish on the little new moon. "If you please, Moon," she said, "I would like to win the spelling match on Friday." Now that was asking a good deal on the moon, and Polly knew it. Almost any of the other boys and girls at school were better at spelling than she. Still, she thought it would be no harm to have the moon on her side too. "Mean to finish this dress for you to wear to school Friday afternoon," her grandmother told her as they sat over their supper. "It's the last day of the fall term, and I hear they are having a spelling match, with all the school committee coming." "Yes," said Polly, "and a solid silver medal for the one who wins it." "Well, well," said her grandmother, "then we must certainly have this done in time. I wouldn't want you to stand up there before them all in your old one." And she began to stitch faster than ever. Her needle flashed in and out like a firefly. "She may not be able to get it done by the day after school," thought Polly. "There are a great many stitches still to sew." So she comforted herself with the thought that all evening and her grandmother had no idea what was going on inside her head, as they sat side by side in the fire, snapping in the wind in the old thorn tree just outside. Every now and again her grandmother would point out some special patch that she remembered. There was a red one with figures of little boys dancing on it. That had been a silk handkerchief once, her grandmother told her, and had belonged to a sea captain who had given it to her great-aunt, Mayetbell, when she was a little girl. Polly's grandmother could remember hearing how he kept a parrot who would whistle Yankee Doodle and say, "Trim your sails and face the music," as plain as could be. Then there was another, a yellow one, as bright as a buttercup. that her grandmother said Great Aunt Maybelle had worn herself the time she danced with General Lafayette. Yes, the grandmother told her. She danced the minuet with him right before the governor and all the rest, and she never missed a step or forgot to keep her toes turned out. But the prettiest patch of all was a very small white one, with forget-me-nots and moss rosebuds scattered over it, and that, Polly's grandmother told her, had come all the way from Paris, and was a bit from the best party sash of a cousin, Marianne, who lived long ago down south. They say she was as pretty as her name, the grandmother said, smoothing the flowers with her finger. She had eyes as blue as these forget-me-nots, and cheeks as pink as roses. That's her guitar in the chest up in the attic. She used to sit on her balcony watching the boats go up and down the Mississippi River and play and sing, "Listen to the Mockingbird." But Polly's mind was all on next Friday, and what she should do if she had to wear a patchwork dress to the spelling match, so that she paid little attention to all this. However, she had odd dreams that night, very odd ones indeed. She dreamed that Cousin Mariana was saying, "Trim your sails and face the music," to General Lafayette, and that Great Aunt Matabelle was doing a hornpipe with the sea captain. It was all mixed up. Friday came along at last, and a snapping cold day it was, with the wind blowing the last of the thornberries off the old tree. Polly's grandmother was still sewing away on the patchwork dress when Polly started off for school, but when she came back at noon, there it was finished, buttons and all. "I said I'd have it ready for you to wear for afternoon if my thimble finger dropped right off doing it," her grandmother said, and her eyes were as bright as could be behind their spectacles. And Polly saw how pleased she was, and how many hundreds of stitches she had sewn into it. So there was nothing for her to do but to put it on and set off for school again. She walked very slowly between the spindly fir trees on the old wood road, for she had no wish to reach the yellow schoolhouse that stood at the crossroads. Every step of the way her feet dragged more and more. Clang, clang, went the schoolhouse bell. That meant it was nearly time for them all to gather. Polly heard it, and never had it sounded so loud and fearsome to her before. She stood still at the edge of the wood road and listened, just for a minute. She thought she would turn back. She could stay on the common all that afternoon, and her grandmother would never know she hadn't been to school. But she happened to look down and see the red patch halfway up her skirt, with the boys dancing their hornpipes on it as cheerfully as could be, and it seemed to her she could hear the sea captain's parrot saying to her quite distinctly, "Trim your sails and face the music." So she right about faced and walked straight up the steps and into the schoolroom. But she had hardly set one foot over the threshold before one of the boys looked at her and piped up, "Polly Patchwork, now it's cool, wears a crazy quilt to school. Thinks she'll win the spelling match in her dress of patch, patch, patch." And all the rest joined in as she went to her seat in the front row. It was rather hard to remember the advice of the sea captain's parrot, but she did the best she could. They did not dare to go on singing the song after the teacher came with the school committee, who sat along with several mothers in chairs against the wall. The oldest of the school committee, the one with gray beard and spectacles, made a speech and showed them the silver medal in its little box all lined with pink cotton, and Polly thought it looked as round and shining as the full moon, and the pink cotton that wrapped it like sunset clouds, as she had often seen them, and she wished with all her heart it might belong to her. Now it was time for all the scholars to line up on the platform, a girl and a boy, a girl and a boy, with the oldest ones at the head and the middle-sized ones in the middle and the smallest ones at the foot. Polly was quite near the bottom, But it would not have made any particular difference where she happened to be. Every one would have stared at her just as hard, for such an odd, happy kind of a dress as hers had never been seen before and probably never will be again. She could hear the laughter and the whispering and nudging about her on every side, and even the visitors in their chairs at the back of the room leaned forward to peer and ask each other what child it was who cut such a strange figure. Polly saw and heard all this, and her cheeks grew very red as she stood, hanging her head and keeping her eyes on a crack in the floor. The little boys on either side of her snickered because her skirts billowed out so stiffly about her. She tried to press them closer with both hands, and as she did so, she looked right down on the yellow patch. Then suddenly she remembered all about Great Aunt Mayetbel, and how her grandmother said she wasn't afraid when she danced the minuet with General Lafayette, or, at any rate, if she had been, she didn't miss a step or forget to keep her toes turned out. Polly didn't know one step of the minuet, but she did know how to turn out her toes as well as anybody. So she did, right then and there, and she folded her hands on front of her and held her head up instead of down. It wasn't nearly so bad after that, for it makes a great difference in people's feelings if only they have their toes and their heads fixed right. And then the spelling match began, and all the scholars were so busy trying to get the right number of letters in the right places, and the school committee and the visitors too busy listening to make sure that they did, to pay so much attention to Polly and the patchwork dress. First they began with the little easy words like such and sure and school, where there would only be one letter to make trouble. Then they began to grow harder and harder till it was receive and believe and neighbor, and it seemed as if the IEs and the EIs got mixed up in the strangest ways. Now the line on the platform was not nearly so long as it had been. Every time a boy or a girl spelled a word wrong, the teacher would shake her head, and someone would go to a seat with all hopes of the medal gone, and the one next in line would move up to fill the empty place. Polly had been very lucky so far. All the words that came her way had been those she knew how to spell. Even scissors, which is not such an easy one after all, with C's and S's what they are. She gave a deep sigh when that was past, but she took no chances with her toes and the tilt of her head, for she had learned from Great Aunt Metabel what a difference they can make. Only 6 were left standing on the platform now, 4 girls and 2 boys, and Polly was still in line. It was like a flight of steps leading from tall Mary Jane Peters, with her pigtails and plaid dress, and Jimmy Willis and his square-toed boots, down to Polly at the foot, looking very small and solemn, at least as much of her showed above and below the patchwork dress, which stood out more stiffly than ever about her. There was a long pause as the man with the gray beard who gave out the words turned over a new page in the speller and cleared his throat. Everyone knew from the silence and the way he looked that something out of the ordinary was coming. "Spell Mississippi," he said, and he fixed his eyes on Mary Jane Peters. "M," began Mary Jane, and she twisted the top button of her dress nearly off while she tried to remember the way all the S's and I's and P's ought to go. "I," then she looked up to the ceiling, but that didn't seem to help. "SS, IS," she stopped short, and anybody could see she hadn't the idea what came next. "You try, Jimmy," the teacher said. Mary Jane Peters was going down to her seat, looking as if she wanted to cry. Jimmy went very carefully and slowly. He got past the first and second S's and most of the eyes, but when he came to the P's, he was all at sea. Now the girl next to him was trying it, but she was no better. It began to seem as if the whole schoolroom was full of I's and S's and P's that had got out of their right places. Now there were two ahead of Polly, now just one, and now she was standing on the platform all alone. She clasped her hands tight in front of her and tried to think how the letters ought to go, but she hadn't an idea, really. Just then a wonderful thing happened. She looked down, and there between her fingers she could see the white square with forget-me-nots and moss rosebuds, and she pressed her hands tight together and said under her breath, "Oh, please, Cousin Mariana, please help me to spell it right." And whether you believe it or not, Polly could see her as plain sitting on the balcony playing her guitar, and the boats going up and down the river with the name that was so hard to spell. It was perfectly still in the schoolroom, so still that Polly could hear the wind in the fir trees outside, but she could only hear Cousin Mariana saying quite clearly and pleasantly, M-I-double-S-I-double-S-I-double-P-I. Polly repeated every letter after her as she said them, while all the scholars leaned forward on their benches, holding their breath to make sure she had every one right. "Thank you, Cousin Mariana," she said softly when she got to the end. But no one heard her. There was such a clapping of hands and stamping of feet all over the classroom. Then the school committee all shook hands with her, and the teacher took the medal out of its pink cotton and hung it on the ribbon round Polly's neck, with all the boys and girls crowding round to see. And the teacher said she had never suspected that Polly was such a good speller, and the school committee said how surprised they were that such a little girl could spell such a long word. But Polly's grandmother didn't seem surprised at all when Polly came home with the medal and told her all that had happened. She only nodded her head and said, "What did I tell you? What did I tell you? It isn't everybody can have an experienced dress like yours to give them advice when they need it. Run out now and bring in another basket of cones and start the fire for supper." The end. And we'll continue another girly story next Wednesday. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.